So today's video is about mean and the measure of center. So mean, which can also be called the average, is the number that evens out or balances a set of data. So if you were to take a set of data and if each number had different values, the mean would be, what would that number be if all of the values were the same? How do we find the mean? We can add up all the values and then divide by the number of values that we have. So here's a little demonstration for mean. If every child, so these are my 3 students and they each have candy. So this student has 3 pieces of candy, this student has 5 pieces of candy, and this student has 1 piece of candy. So the question would be, well, if every child had the same number of pieces of candy, how many pieces would each child have? So that would mean I would need to be taking these pieces of candy and I would try to even it out in a way so that all 3 of the students had the same number. So I can move this one over here, and then now they have 3 and they have 4 and they have 2, and then if I move this one over here, I can see that one number that will even out the candy for all 3 of the students would be 3. And we would say that the mean or the average would be 3. So the mean is the number that evens out or balances all of the numbers. So therefore the mean or average number of pieces of candy is 3, because 3 is the number that evens out or balances the candy so that everyone has the same number of pieces. So here's an example. New teachers start off making different salaries their first year on the job. Find the mean salary given the values below. So one teacher is making $28,000, one making $30,000, one's making $32,000, one is making $29,000, one is making $26,000, and then another one is making $34,000. And we want to know that if we were trying to even out the salaries so that all of the teachers would start off making the same amount, what would that number be? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add up all the values in the table. So if we add up all the values, we will end up with 179,000. Then the next step is to divide by the number of numbers. So if you see, there are 6 different salaries up here. So we're going to have to take 179,000 and divide it by 6, which would give us $29,833.33. So that means the mean or average salary is $29,833.33. So if all the teachers started out making the same salary, they would all make $29,833.33. So what is an outlier? So an outlier is a value that's either a lot higher or a lot lower than the other values in the data set. And why is an outlier important? An outlier can either make the mean higher or lower. So an outlier does make a significant difference in the mean value or the average value. And so we're going to do an example to see how that works. So what difference does the outlier make on the mean for the data table below? So we have a list of people and then we have their number of pets. So we see Jack has 2 pets, Hillary has 1, Joey has 2, Nancy has 3, Bill has 2, Greg has 4, and Cruella DeVille, and you guys know Cruella DeVille is from 101 Dalmatians. Well, Cruella DeVille has 101 pets. So who is the outlier in this table? Well, obviously the outlier is Cruella DeVille. Cruella DeVille. Cruella DeVille. Y'all know that song? I don't know. Maybe I'm outdated. Anyway, what is the mean number of pets if we do not include the outlier? So if we were to just take Cruella DeVille out of the table and just look at Jack through Greg, what would the mean number of pets be? So what we would do is first we'd add up Jack and Hillary and Joey and Nancy and Bill and Greg, and we would get 12. And then that is 6 people. So we would take that 12 and divide it by 6, which means that the mean number of pets would be 2 without the outlier. So without Cruella DeVille in our table, the mean number of pets would be 2. So if we were to even it out, everyone would have 2 pets. And that's kind of close to what everyone else has. So we would say that would be a pretty accurate average. But what happens if we find the mean with the outlier? So if we do include Miss Cruella de Vil in our table, in our mean, how will that change the mean? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to add up all of the values, including the 101, which will give us 113. Then after we do that, we're going to take 113 and divide it by 7, which gives us 16 and 110. So when we include the outlier, Cruella de Vil, it changes the mean from 2 all the way to 16. And an average is supposed to give you an idea of your data set. So if we're looking at this data set and we told you that the average was 16, you would get the idea that the people have a lot of pets. But if you look at the actual data, you'll see that no, most of the people in the table have very few pets. But then you've got this outlier, who Cruella de Vil, because her number is so big, what it does is it actually skews the data and it makes the mean a whole lot higher. So outliers can have huge impacts on your data, on your mean. So you do want to be careful with outliers. You do want to at least recognize when you have an outlier, and also you do want to analyze what the outlier is doing to your mean or your measure of center. So keep in mind that the mean or the average is the number that evens out or balances a set of data, and you can find the mean by adding up all of the numbers and dividing by the number of numbers.